An agentic AI system operates more like an agent. It can set or refine its own goals and sub-goals, plan and execute multiple steps, adapt and change, monitor progress. It has autonomy, it's proactive, it's goal-directed, it's adaptable, it has memory and context. Today in the podcast, we welcome back Jamie Park, a legal operations consultant at Superpanel, to unpack what agentic AI really is, how it works inside of law firms, and what makes it different than most AI tools today.
What I'm hearing is it can handle multiple sequences and reach multiple goals at one time. And that's what differentiates it from a chatbot, which is following one workflow to reach one end goal.
We explore how digital teammates are moving beyond single task automations, managing complex, multi-step workflows that last for a long time and mirror the decision-making of real team members.
What does this mean in terms of law firms and their capacity? Because I think short-sighted wise, people think, oh, maybe I can lower my headcount or I can scale without increasing headcount. But from the consumer side, does this mean that having a case is going to be way more accessible? Is this going to be a full transformation?
And we look ahead for what this transformation could mean for the industry. Greater access to justice, new models of legal services delivery, and a redefinition of how firms scale. Stick around. I'm Julien, and this is the Scalable Law Blueprint.
I guess AI is such a broad term nowadays. There's a bunch of different types. What is agentic AI, and how does that also, I'm interested to know, influence the type of language you use, such as digital teammate, rather than saying AI agent, AI tool?
So one of the reasons that I stay away from the term agentic AI, at least when it comes to like talking to customers, is people then think about agents. And they're like, oh, do you have multiple agents? And I find there's a ton of confusion in the whole AI space about what an agent is. If you go to different companies and they say they have an agent, that can mean many different things. An agent can mean as simple as like something that summarizes some text for you. That can be an agent. It's like a text summarization agent. There can be an agent that drafts an email. That can be an agent. Other people will say an agent is something that does a few more things. It'll draft an email. It'll tell you why it drafted the email. It'll send the email, and it'll update that email, the fact that it sent it and what it sent, and a summary of what the email is out in, a CRM or something. So to use the term agent is so confusing because you can go talk to 25 different tech companies and get 25 different definitions of an agent. And so I just find it confusing. That's why I don't use the word term agent. We use the term sequences, and a sequence is like a workflow. But if you want to talk in sort of the parlance of AI, technically what we are is an agentic AI platform. We're an orchestration platform for agentic AI. I don't say that because it's confusing. Like, why would I say that? It's much easier to say a digital teammate. I'll also get into why. So what is agentic AI, I think was your question. So like, I just pulled definitions from a few sources here. One, Google's AI summary. One is ChatGPT. We can pull up other sources. So what is agentic AI? Or what is the meaning of it, right? It's autonomy. It's an agentic system that can operate independently, perform tasks without constant human oversight. Proactive decision-making. Instead of reacting to commands, agentic AI proactively makes decisions and takes action to achieve a set of goals. Reasoning and planning. These AI systems can reason, plan complex multi-step tasks, and break down challenges into manageable actions. Agentic AI can learn, adapt to changing environments, and adjust its approach based on new data and evolving conditions. The term agentic highlights the AI's ability to act independently, but in a goal-driven manner, embodying a form of digital agency. How these systems work. Perception, it gathers information about the environment. Memory, it stores relevant data, including user preferences, past interactions, things like that. Reasoning, it analyzes information, evaluates options, makes autonomous decisions. Actions, using tools and APIs to execute certain tasks. So some examples of this, right? Autonomous vehicles, smart homes, personal assistants, complex workflows. We're in the complex workflow category. Let's just look at another example or another definition real quick, a ChatGPT explanation. So we've got, the core idea, unlike traditional AI systems that react passively to inputs, right? Like think like a prompt or the user asking to do something, an agentic AI system operates more like an agent. It can set or refine its own goals and sub-goals, plan and execute multiple steps, adapt and change, monitor progress. It has autonomy. It's proactive. It's goal-directed. It's adaptable. It has memory and context. Also some examples: a personal assistant that not only answers emails, but prioritizes tasks, scheduled meetings, research agents that explore things and generate hypotheses, run simulations, business process automations that coordinate between different software and systems. It does an end-to-end workflow, why it matters, et cetera, et cetera. So this is basically what it is, right? It's this sort of agentic performance, and that the system is acting with some degree of agency to perform some task. That is different from you asking an AI to do something, right? You go into ChatGPT or Anthropic or something. Typically, you're asking a question, you're creating a prompt, and you're like tweaking the prompt, and you're just like continuously looping, trying to get it to do something. An agentic AI system is more like there is an end goal that is trying to be reached, and the system independently makes its own decisions to get there. And that could take multiple steps or one step, whatever. Usually not one step, but technically it could still be an agentic system if it decides sort of what step to take or how to take that step. That's how I think about agentic AI and what it is. I think it's confusing to call it that, but that's what it is. And that, when you think about it, what's the closest approximation to that? It's a teammate. It's a person. It's a worker that's doing some workflow autonomously, which is what teammates do, which is why we call our product a digital teammate.
We can talk more about the nuances of how this separates it from, let's say, a chatbot with just the goal of getting contact information or scheduling a meeting, or even like when you think of automations like Zapier, it's taking you from trying to complete a task step by step, but isn't aware of a long-term goal or doing multiple of those, what we call sequences in one. So yeah, maybe let's talk about how Superpanel is so customizable because it has that agentic feature where you can give it a goal.
So it really comes into play with like complexity and long-running ways of like handling something. So Zapier is a good example of this, or other automation platforms. Like, or if you had a human where you're like, step one, right? You might do step one, and then, if step one, then do step two, right? And then, ad infinitum. You can keep adding these, but like the more complex the process and the more situations that might be encountered, the more complex this gets. Like even just in what appears on the surface to be a simple use case that we tackle, which is lemon law intake, right? Intake and onboarding of lemon law customers. If you look at the combinatorial math on that, like there are millions of permutations that a system might encounter. That system could be like a human system and our humans trying to understand what's going on, or a machine system. And so it's very difficult to plan a whole bunch of rules around that. If you want it to handle more and more and more autonomously, what you need is sort of like this orchestration and intelligence layer to be able to have essentially an emergent property. So rather than defining every absolute finite thing that needs to be done, instead, if you actually design more like a cognitive engine, which is the way Superpanel works, is we have this cognitive engine, and we teach the cognitive engine sort of about the world and what it needs to do, and about certain case types or situations it might encounter. And then there's an emergent property that happens. The system then behaves in a way that's sort of within the guardrails that we define, but it's an emergent property. We don't know exactly how it's going to behave. We give it some goals, and it makes its own decisions on how to execute that, which is different than sort of a step-by-step flow. And it's also different than, say, like a chatbot, where a chatbot's just one interaction versus multiple interactions over a long period of time. So what we have, and the way it works, is we have this, what we call internally a cognitive decision engine. This cognitive decision engine runs off of, we teach it about how to operate in a given environment. In our case, we work with law firms. So we teach it about how to operate in law firms. We call this a digital teammate externally, but this digital teammate or cognitive decision engine is given access to some tools. Let's just use a different shape here. Let's say, phone number, and let's say email address or inbox. Let's say we also give it access to CRM, or a case management system, maybe also some, I don't know, document storage or management system. And we can add more, right? It can also be like a document signing tool, whatever. So we give it access to a number of tools. And then what we also do is we teach it about a given flow of work. So we give it some goals. So what we'll do, let me just add another one here, is we'll say, okay, so with these tools and capabilities up here, right, it has the ability to do interactions. It can do interactions over a phone call, over SMS, because it's got access to a phone. It can send emails. It can store documents, which means it has to process documents and know where to store them. It can update the CRM. It could use the CRM to decide what to say. Just with these tools, it can do a lot. There's a whole bunch of capabilities that it has. And so then what we do down here is we give it some goals and operating procedures of a given law firm. We define this in a workflow. We call these sequences, and each sequence has a start and an end. And the start might be something like, I'm mixing up my my shapes here. But let's make this a different color to delineate this a little bit. Let's make this blue. And so this might be check email, and if an email has a lead, start the sequence, right? So if someone emails in, or if there's a lead that comes in, it'll start the sequence. And then maybe the sequence has an end goal. Let's say the end goal is signed retainer agreement, right? And so in between, there's a lot that can happen. There might be a few different. So first off, we got to check the email. We might have to update a CRM, maybe not. We might have to send an email and have an interaction over email. It might be a separate interaction over SMS. There might be a phone call or two. There might be some questions. There might be some follow-up data requests. We got to collect, images or documents or things like that. If we use employment law, an example, maybe we have to ask a bunch of questions over phone and email, and maybe over SMS, and maybe there's a client portal where documents get uploaded to, or maybe those get emailed. And essentially, based on this goals and procedure, the system is independently deciding what it should do next and why it should do it. It's documenting why it should do it. So we can have an interaction. We can then have another interaction here. All of what's happening is based on what we call a situation. And so if we're talking to a person, we want to know what is their situation. And the situation can be defined using 1,000 different data points or less, depends. Let's say 100 data points. Like these data points, if I just stick to the employment law example, it might be like, what happened to someone? When did it happen? Who did it happen with? What was the reaction? Did they submit a complaint? Is there a document evidence showing that submission of a complaint? Is there a reaction to the complaint? Who are the parties involved? What are the names of the parties involved? Like this gets long. There's hundreds and hundreds of data points. How much did they get paid? Who's the employer? Is this a government employer? Is it not a government employer? Whatever. And so what's happening is this cognitive decision engine, or this digital teammate, is constantly checking the situation and then going back and looking at its goals and operating procedures and then deciding what to do next in the context of the sequence. This is a digital teammate just autonomously moving along, deciding what to do. If at any point it gets confused, it'll escalate to a human. It'll ask for help, or it'll escalate and say, hey, someone on the team, can you handle this? I don't know what to do here. But essentially, we're trying to get the digital teammate to autonomously do all the things it needs to do across all the different systems, using all the different tools we've given it capabilities for, and get to an end state. And then once that end state is reached, and there could be other end states. There can be like, failed to sign a retainer, or like not qualified to sign a retainer, whatever it might be. We're trying to get to some end state. And this is very different than sort of chaining together a bunch of automations. It's very different than, like a chatbot that's a single interaction. This is multiple interactions that have interdependencies based on other data points and inputs from past interactions, or from interactions that maybe the human had with a person potentially. And so this is much more complex, and it lasts for much longer. And then you can have other sequences that sort of chain on top of this. Maybe once the retainer is signed, maybe a person comes in, reviews the retainer, maybe has a quick call with a new client and then says, hey, welcome aboard. And then maybe there's more data that needs to be collected and it gets passed back to the digital person. The digital person now runs off on another workflow to do the same thing. And maybe they're autonomously collecting more evidence for another month or two. It's really the complexity that separates, or the complexity handling, I should say, that separates Superpanel from your average sort of chatbot or like a voice AI product that sort of just does inbound answering and things like that. This is much more of like a digital teammate, is how it behaves and how it feels, how it shows up. And yes, technically it is agentic AI because it is all these steps, but that's how it's operating. We just thought it was simplest to call it a digital teammate because that's kind of how it shows up in our customer accounts. Hey, quick question for you. Does your intake and evidence collection process ever feel like the biggest bottleneck in your entire firm? Chasing follow-ups, collecting documents, and just trying to keep everything organized while leads are slipping through the cracks? That's exactly what Superpanel fixes. It's like a digital teammate that automates everything from first contact all the way through to evidence collection. So nothing gets missed, and your team can focus on clients and legal work and not admin. If that sounds like something your firm needs, scan the QR code or click the link in the show notes to see how it works. Now back to the conversation.
What I'm hearing is it can handle multiple sequences and reach multiple goals at one time. And that's what differentiates it from a chatbot, which is following one workflow to reach one end goal. This is like that, but on a much larger scale.
I wouldn't say multiple sequences at one time because a chatbot isn't a workflow. It's one interaction. A workflow is more like, at least as we describe it in a sequence, is like multiple interactions to reach some end goal. That end goal might be split into a few goals that require a few sequences to run sequentially, not necessarily in parallel. A chatbot is like, it's a human-computer interface. Same with like a voice call, right? One voice call is basically a chatbot. It's a human-computer interface where you're just interacting over one interaction. It gets to a quick end and it's done. It's not a sort of like multi-interaction, multi-system, independent decision-making based on all kinds of variables. It's more just one interaction. You could argue it's agentic and that it's deciding what to say next. So a chatbot is agentic and then it's sort of independently deciding what to say based on what's been said. But it's not complex agentic AI. It's not handling long, complex autonomous workflows. And the real like massive value unlock and massive potential with AI is building these systems that can autonomously execute much more complex, long-running work. And that's different. Like that's the piece that we do. That's the piece we do well. And that requires a much more sophisticated architecture and cognitive decision engine under the hood to be able to essentially orchestrate the entire thing and make sure it's running accurately.
I see. So maybe let's define exactly what it's capable of. Because some people may be hearing it and think, oh, does that mean I can just replace all of my staff and put agentic AI in there? And where do you see the trajectory of agentic AI and what realistically is it capable of?
I think about it maybe a little bit differently. Let's think about it in terms of the life cycle of a case. So life cycle of a case starts in our mind, in our definition, at first interaction, right? So someone calls in or they fill out a form or something. That's like the very first touch point. Then you've got some degree of sort of shallow top of funnel intake, like, do we think this person has a case? And then maybe you go deeper and you start qualifying a little bit more. You try to understand more of their situation, what happened to them. And then maybe you sign them on a retainer. And then maybe you start investigating, you start collecting in evidence. And you're getting evidence from maybe different places. Maybe you're getting it from the person directly. In the case of PI, or going out to providers and getting that. And you're pulling together all this evidence to sort of understand if what this person said is true. And also, maybe any other evidence you can gather around this case that helps build a case for them, which you'll then use to, generate a demand letter potentially and get to a settlement. Or if that doesn't work, then maybe you start going to trial and then you go into the actual litigation part of it. So many cases in plaintiff law obviously result in settlement. A lot of them don't go to trial. So I kind of focus on those. Going to trial is sort of a different thing. Now, if you think about agentic systems, my question is always like, if we say all the way through to settlement, like how much of that could be done with an agentic system as an AI? Right now, today, deployed, not obviously the full life cycle. Like there's a lot of that you need a human involved. And that makes total sense. The question is like, what's that going to look like in a year? What's that going to look like in 2 years? What's that's going to look like in 3 years? Because software compounds. So as you build these capabilities in, as we think about it, like what are the capabilities? The capabilities are like, I'm not going to say endless, but they're, I think, greater than a lot of people think they are. And so I always look at it as like, if we take the entire life cycle of a case, how much of that can be done by an agentic system? And if you split it into pieces, that's what we call sequences. Where can we deploy a sequence and have it run and perform at or above the benchmark of success that was established before when a human team was doing it? And what's the escalation rate? So how often does that sequence fail and you need to have someone jump in and correct it? Because software is compounding, the answer today might be like, okay, you could probably get, on average, let's say today, 60% of all intake work up until retainer is fully autonomous today. We've already done 95%. Like we've done way higher than that. Just I'm saying on average, because not every customer is going to want to do that. And not every customer, law firm, not every law firm is going to want to do that. And not every consumer is going to want to go through all the way that automated path. But if you have an automated path that can do 95% of intake, and let's say on average consumers take it 50% of the time, you essentially got like 50% automation. But then as that experience just keeps getting better and better, and as consumers accept it more and more and more, because everyone always has an off-ramp. So as consumers accept it more and more and don't take the off-ramp, eventually you start to get an average of like 60%, 70%, 80%. And I'm just talking about like pre-retainer intake. And then we get into like evidence collection. How much of that can be done by an autonomous system? We're doing on some customers, roughly 95% of that is fully agentic system running. Then the next thing is like, well, what about demand drafting? There's already tools being used to do that largely automatically or autonomously. Maybe not always agentically and more like human involved in prompting and things like that, but that can probably get to an agentic system eventually. And so you can see this kind of like chaining together of different pieces where you can think about from a staffing perspective, you maybe had like a team that did this part of the funnel, and a team that did this part of the funnel or flow, I should say. And then this part, you can start to think about providing fully self-serve digital paths for each little step of those. And if you're running a law firm, it's like, okay, let's deploy an autonomous path option for this step, see how it works, get it working, great. All right, cool, let's add another step, see how it works, get it working. Let's add another step, see how it works. You can keep pushing it down and down and down to do more and more and more. So I think where we're going, I think in the next 2.5 to 5 years, I think there's going to be a lot of fully autonomous, like end-to-end digital start to resolutions of cases with probably just a little tiny little bit of human oversight to like double check things, make sure it's accurate. It may not be like 100%. Like I still think you need humans to sort of manage the system, but humans double checking and making sure there's quality, there's some quality control there. And what excites me about that is like, first off, it never needs to be provided as the only option for consumers. You always got to give consumers an off-ramp. But as software compounds, as product experiences compound, as that gets better and better and better, and you deploy it on more and more of the flow, more and more people start taking that option. But what it also does, I think, is it expands the market for legal services. So if every single law firm had, like for cases they would otherwise not take, it's like, it's not really enough revenue for us in this one. It's not really our sweet spot. Like, what if every one of them could say, hey, actually, for these cases we would otherwise not take, here's like a fully digital path to get your case resolved. We're barely involved, but we can help you, but you got to go through this path. And then let's say the mid-tier cases, it's like, actually, we can fully automate these too. And then these like complex, hairy cases up here, we got to do much more manually. But like, I just think that that option, if provided to people, more and more people will take it, and they don't have to take it. It doesn't have to be the only option. But I do think it expands the market for legal services. I think a lot of cases that are usually aren't taken could be taken. I don't think we're there yet, but like there are so many pieces in place right now in terms of capabilities. I see it in our product. Like we've got all the sort of core capabilities. We haven't fully fleshed it out to do like obviously end-to-end case, but at least from an intake perspective, which is where we're focused, like we're already doing 95% autonomous in a number of situations. And then there's some customers where they just use us for like a smaller piece. But like, I just think that's going to keep getting more and more over time.
Yeah, that's what I was going to start asking you about is from the consumer side, what does this mean in terms of law firms and their capacity? Because I think short-sighted wise, like people think, oh, maybe I can lower my headcount or I can scale without increasing headcount. But from the consumer side, does this mean that, having a case is going to be way more accessible? Is this going to be a full transformation where, like what you saw with like commercial flights, where it was for a select few people, and then, now anyone can take a flight anywhere? What this means in terms of a law firm's capacity for consumers, and the type of people they're going to be able to serve, rather than, these lengthy cases and only being able to take on so many.
I think it can have a huge impact. Like there is such a barrier accessing legal service now. Like we all know this. We all know the justice gap. Everyone talks about it. But like, I feel like we're all marching in a direction as an industry where we can start creating sort of digitally delivered legal services or autonomous legal services. It's not going to happen in all legal services, but I think there are certain places it's going to happen first. And I think it'll probably expand to cover more areas than people are even thinking today. And I think that's huge for the consumer because, again, if you're a law firm with, a certain capacity of X, let's say X equals 100, and that's just your capacity. Let's say you can handle 100 cases at once. If with the exact same team size, you can now handle 150, that's one way to look at it. Like same case types, 150 now instead of 100. That's fantastic. If you could lower the cost of delivering that service, right, then you maybe open yourself up to take cases that you just never would have taken before. Maybe a case that just wasn't worth it now becomes worth it because you can deliver it for way less cost than you could. And so maybe now instead of just going from 100 to 150 cases, you can actually open up a whole new market and be like, hey, actually, we're going to start doing this type of law as well, which we normally didn't. And, now we have another 100 cases we can handle in that type of law. And I think that's just nothing but good for consumers. It's just like making sure that we are, building these autonomous systems properly, building, all the decision engine framework and everything properly, educating and helping law firms, oversee these systems and know that like the exit valves or the offboarding ramps for consumers are always there. I think about it like e-commerce. I don't know the exact numbers, but in 1995 or something, e-commerce as a percentage of all shopping from a consumer perspective was tiny. People didn't trust the internet. They're like, I'm not going to put my credit card in. I'm not going to buy things. Like that seems crazy. I need to go to the store. I got to talk to someone. I got to ask them about the product. Like the idea of just buying it all was kind of crazy. And like it started with books, right? Like famously, Amazon sold books. It's a little bit easier, sort of less questions about the product. Fast forward to today, I think e-commerce as a total global share of shopping is somewhere in the order of like 10% or something, or 12%. I don't remember the exact numbers, but it's massive and it's growing year over year. And consumers are buying things that you would have never expected them to buy online. People are buying mattresses and vehicles, and like they're shopping for clothes, and there's tools that help you like understand your size and fit. And so like the digital experience has continuously iterated and evolved to create this entire digital delivery of shopping category. And I think the same thing is going to happen for legal services. I think sort of the e-commerceification, if that's even a word, of legal services is going to be massive. And I think what enables that, which is new, that was never available before, is the ability to build agentic AI systems that can handle this. Because you can't really e-commerce I guess you could buy a service online, like you click it, but you don't know what you're getting. Like you don't get the execution of the service. Whereas now we're entering a world where it's not just software as a service. You can now have service delivered as software. And that means service industries like legal, as well as finance and other ones, you can start to get this kind of e-commerceification, much like you saw with physical products. And I think the same thing's going to happen. And I don't have a crystal ball. I can't tell you the timeline, but I can tell you with real data from our own product, we're already pushing and executing at volume, at scale, accurately, autonomous delivery of certain parts of that workflow. Frankly, much more than I thought we would, and farther along than I thought we would be at this time.
It's pretty mind-blowing to me, actually, because I was completely on the other side, working with a law firm and being on the operational side. And my whole thought was, how is this going to increase our conversion rate? How is this going to help us from having to hire more staff? And then, how is this going to help with our internal capacity? But it's such a smaller step in the big grand transition of what is actually taking place in the legal industry. Going back to kind of the architecture, and it sounds so complicated, and there's a lot of variables in building the architecture. I guess some people would be concerned about how actually accurate agentic AI is. And how do you make sure it's accurate?
It's pretty easy to measure because you see the outputs. And so first, I would say the same problem exists with humans. You hire one, or even worse, you hire 20 people. How do you make sure they're accurate, right? Like you need call recordings, you got to listen to call recordings. You need AI to analyze call recordings and surface, are people saying the right things? Are they doing the right things? Are they representing the firm properly? It's it's the exact same problem, just applied to a digital person instead of a human person. And so we use a lot of the same tactics. We've got our own AI systems that oversee what our digital teammate does, that's surfacing its own quality control and also escalating whenever things kind of look like they might go off the rails, or look like maybe the customer's not happy about something, or looks like the customer, if the experience isn't going well, we escalate to a human. And then we also track our escalation rate. So when we look at a given workflow in agentic AI, we want to make sure the escalation rate is low, which means we're successfully completing and getting to the other end. And when we complete get to the other end, just like a person would, right? Like usually at a law firm, if just as an example, if someone gets a client to sign a retainer, there's generally a review process of all right, did you ask them all the right questions? Did you get all the right things? Can we actually say yes to this retainer? Or did you maybe skip some steps? And so we pass off to a person that does that as well, which is another double check. And you could probably build agentic systems that double check that as well. And so we track this, but we track it also by making sure we go through testing phases as well. So every workflow or sequence that we deploy, which is an agentic AI system running, we just run on small cohorts, and we test for both kind of subjective quality as well as more objective quality of did it actually accomplish the thing it was supposed to accomplish, and how frequently did it or did it not. And so we measure that before doing anything at scale. And it's much the same way. If you hire a person, you got to do the same thing with a person. If you hire 20 people, you got to do the same thing with 20 people. And so we kind of operate the same way.
That's everything for today. That sums up our discussion on agentic AI. And we'll see you guys next time.
Awesome. Thanks, Jamie.
Thanks for checking out the Scalable Law Blueprint. If today's conversation helped you think differently about how your law firm runs, share this episode with a colleague, and don't forget to follow the show so you never miss what's next. To see how automation can transform your intake and operations, visit superpanel.io and discover how leading plaintiff firms scale with confidence. I'm Julien Emery, and I'll see you in the next episode.